Welcome back, tributes, to episode 38 of Into the Arena. I'm Holly.
And I'm Emily.
And we have two amazing guests with us today. We have Chase and we have Taylor. We are here to talk all about Survivor and the Hunger Games. But before we dive into our episode, make sure that you join us for Tribute Talk tomorrow, because we're going to be talking about the Onset Cinema event that happened this past weekend. Taylor and Emily will have gone, and check out our Instagram at Into the Arena Podcast for more of that content from the event. But like I said, today's episode is going to be about Survivor, because Suzanne Collins has said that Survivor was part of the inspiration for the Hunger Games trilogy.
I mean, we talk about Survivor all the time anyway, but now we get a dedicated episode. I feel like we should just talk about.
This was my plan since the beginning.
You should talk about your master plan, Chase.
My master plan when I found the podcast was to befriend the host, check. Join the lives, check. Make them do a Survivor podcast, check. And then be invited to the Survivor podcast. So the master plan has officially been completed at this point. It only took a year and a couple months. So this will probably be the last time you ever see me. I mean, how can you top this?
Podcast is over.
Yeah, podcast series finale right here.
Rip.
Oh my gosh. So Taylor, how long have you been a fan of Survivor?
Well, I watched it when it first premiered back in 2000. That's when I first got into it. And then I was a huge Survivor fan. It was something that I always watched with my dad. I think my sister was into it as well. And so I was really into it. I was in kindergarten in 2000. I even remember one of my friends and I having these really serious Survivor conversations on the playground. And when I was in fourth grade, so I was probably 9 or so, I got a Survivor board game type thing. It was really fun.
What?
Yeah, it was some kind of thing. It had these scenarios, and I had a sleepover, and all my friends and I were playing it. It was really cool. And then somewhere along the way, probably when I was 10 or so, I just kind of stopped watching it. I don't know, when you're a little preteen and you think you're too cool for stuff, probably. And I just got other interests. And so I didn't watch it until last season when you guys brought me back into it. And I was so glad because I forgot how much I loved it. And it brought back so many memories from when I watched it when I was a kid. But shout out to my dad, because he's watched every season as it's premiered since 2000. He's been dedicated since it came on TV. But yeah, that's kind of how I started watching it, and then kind of got away from it and then came back to it.
Oh, I love that. Also, I'm reminded of you talking about being in your preteens, because I didn't watch Survivor until last year. And I just remember my parents have watched it since it started, and they would watch it every week. And I'd walk downstairs and I'd be like, what is this garbage show? I was such a hater, and I had never even seen it. So, but now I love it. What about you, Chase? Because obviously you're a big fan.
Nah, just a little. I mean, no, I have always heard about it. My family had never watched it, like y'all's had. I always heard about it in any of the Hunger Games books, companion books I would read about. They'd always have a section on reality TV. So Survivor always got mentioned. It was always on my radar to watch, and so I would see an episode or two and make a good effort. I'm gonna watch it this time, and then I would never fully watch it. But one night before vacation, for some reason, I had recorded the last part of Survivor Game Changers season 34, and I really, really liked it. And so the next day on the way down to the beach, which was kind of fitting for me to start down there, I found a way to watch all the seasons. So I started on season 1, finished season 1 and 2 at the beach, and then from there I watched all 42, well, soon to be 42 seasons chronologically, and seen some of them 3 times, some of them 4, and I love it. It's the best.
See, I always feel like I'm a fake Survivor fan, because when you guys are talking, probably because you've watched it for so long, you're throwing names around, and you can just right off the bat, season this is this season, this is this. And for me, I'm just like, I had to go back for this episode. Like, I know who I love as players, I know what happened on the seasons I love, but I don't remember like all the facts behind it. And so I give you guys a lot of credit.
I started watching Survivor from the very beginning because I had never watched it until last year. I'd heard about it, but I don't know, I just had such a different perception of like what it was gonna be. I guess I thought it was gonna be more like focused on drama, kind of like The Bachelor or like other reality shows. So I was always a huge fan of The Amazing Race. Like that was my show. But I mean, then Chase got me into Survivor and I started watching from the very beginning, and you literally remember every detail about the first couple of seasons. Like you weren't even watching it, but I would like mention something that I was watching and you'd be like, oh yeah, the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches they ate or whatever.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna ask if you have a buff, because I'm like, why aren't you wearing it?
Hold on. Yeah.
Oh my god.
The first 5 seasons. Then I had the first 6 to 10 seasons, and then I have 2 more from Winners at War, and they're really expensive though, so I try not to buy a lot.
What is everybody's favorite season of Survivor?
Well, since I haven't seen a good chunk of them for a while, and I don't really clearly remember the very beginning ones, this season I'm really loving. I love all the people on it. I thought I liked last one a lot, but this one I really, really like the season that's currently on.
I mean, the cast makes the show, right?
Absolutely.
So more than anything else.
I'm very old school. I love like the first 11. So my favorite is probably Survivor the Amazon season 6. It's men versus women. That's usually my go-to. It has one of my favorite players on it. So that's usually my go-to if I ever try to get people into Survivor. I'm always like, go watch season 6 and you'll be hooked. It's just a fun season. It's entertaining. It's still got that survival element. So that's my go-to.
That's the wrong suggestion. It has to be Pearl Islands.
Pearl Islands is so overrated.
Okay, Emily, what about you?
Pearl Islands is my favorite.
Yeah.
My second favorite, or maybe tied for my first, is Africa. That's a really good one too. I just love I love the cast, but the location is just so different. I really like those early seasons because of that.
Probably my second favorite, or somewhere in there, would be Australia. I always hear Australia was Survivor at its biggest. I mean, that was like the highest rated season on average, and it's just one of my favorite locations too.
I have 2 favorites. My go-to favorite is season 24, One World, because I love Kim. I love that season.
I mean, no, I love Kim, but that's a shocker.
And the second season I actually ever saw is one of my favorites, season 20, The Heroes versus Villains, because that was like one of the only ones on Netflix, and it's just so iconic. So I like the seasons like 20 through 30 are like my favorite Survivor seasons.
See, we did a live where we watched season 20, and that was the first thing I ever saw. And I feel like I probably shouldn't have watched that first because I just didn't get any of the goodness of it. I'm like excited to watch it again.
Now we should dive in, I guess, because this is a Hunger Games podcast. Talk a little bit about Survivor and the Hunger Games.
Survivor was developed by a man named Charlie Parsons. He was from the UK. He first showed it on TV in Sweden. It was called Expedition Robinson, blah, blah, blah. So then it came to America with Mark Burnett. I feel like a history teacher right now.
Yeah,
this is great.
As if I was here for all this. Like I was not even alive. So Mark Burnett had a real hard time getting a network to pick it up because it was going to go in the summer. They put on like reruns or movies during the summer because no one watched TV. Everyone was out and about on vacation, things like that. So nothing really premiered in the summer. So Survivor got like this crappy slot in the summer of you're just going to be a test run with CBS. CBS took the chance because Mark Burnett got sponsors, which is why sometimes you'll see like Applebee's sponsored an episode and stuff like that. That goes all the way back to the beginning. Like he had to get sponsors to pay for the show because the networks were so scared the show would fail. And so when he got the sponsors, everything, so then they had to advertise, obviously. Well, the original advertisement never said they were being voted out. All they said was 16 strangers are going on an island and one will be the winner. There's only going to be one that's going to walk away with $1 million. So they kind of hyped it up to believe that either people were going to quit or people would die on the island. So everyone started freaking out. Like, what is this show? Howard Stern, who's a pretty crude dude, if you've ever listened to him, like he's pretty lenient on his morals, I feel like. he was even saying like, this is disgusting. Reality TV or just TV in general has gone too far at this point. If we're having people die on TV just for our entertainment, which is kind of,
Interesting.
similar. And so that was kind of the original ad for Survivor. I always thought that was kind of interesting because the fact that people tuned in to that and thought they were going to watch people die is kind of sick.
Yeah. That's why their ratings were so high.
Yeah.
Is that why I tuned in 2000? Is that what I was?
Yeah.
Kindergarten
Taylor,
5-year-old Taylor. I like the point that you made about the love for the winners, because obviously I loved season 20, but that was the first, like one of the first few seasons I've seen. So I didn't really have a relationship with the cast members at the time, similar to Emily, because I mean, that was the first one we'd seen. Going back and rewatching it after viewing past seasons and seeing them before, like you do grow an attachment. And I mean, that's why they kept bringing back cast members, for example, like Ozzy, obviously, Russell, Boston Rob, like all these people where they kept coming back season after season. I mean, Sandra won it twice, so I think that's a good comparison between the two.
It's kind of like the parasocial relationships that when we were talking to Dr. Kamisha Russell.
It made me hurt. When she was talking about that, I just felt so sad. I was like, turns toward like my shelves and shelves of like Hunger Games and like Twilight things, just like, oh, not me, that couldn't be me. Okay, also like this is off topic, but I loved Ozzy, of course, but I don't know if you guys follow Ozzy's TikToks now. He's like gone off the rails.
Yeah,
so I feel like
crazy.
if he got brought back, I'd be like, keep him away from me.
Wait, what season is he from?
You haven't gotten there yet. He'll be in 13.
Okay.
Well, he's in a few, but yeah, you haven't gotten there yet.
See, you can just name drop things like that. Like, oh, what was Ozzy's first?
I know the
13,
boot
of
orders
course.
of most seasons.
Oh my god, that's so crazy.
I do love how Suzanne like put in the quarter quell with like an all-star season. Like it's so much like Survivor, or any other reality TV series where they bring people back, but I just love it. She's so smart.
So a lot of the older winners, they would get like magazine covers or TV shows. The first winner, Richard Hatch, almost went on SNL as the host. Like he was slated to do that, and I forgot what happened. It fell through somehow. But I mean, one of the most famous, obviously, and she's controversial to some, Elizabeth Hasselbeck, and some people are like, who? But for a reality star to go on to a show like The View and then host a show on Fox News, like that was kind of unheard of, especially in the early days. Like, how did she get? She has the biggest trajectory. And I know a country singer is Chase Rice, who I only know because I looked him up. I don't really care about country music, but he's a really big country singer, and he was on Survivor. It's kind of odd how some people go into it for celebrity, some people go into it for like the adventure or whatever. But back in the early days, it was a lot of people went into it with the idea that I'm going to be famous out of this, and it didn't work out for most people. But it's just kind of crazy how that launched some people's careers, and I don't know, just like in, the victors, like they became national name, big celebrities, especially if they were popular. And that happened a lot in the early days with people like that.
I think another like similarity between the two is as the show has gone on, it's like the events are much more like dramatic. For example, when they're doing the next week on Survivor, like if somebody somehow ends up like hospitalized or they have to like get like the doctors in or whatever, I feel like that adds more excitement and hype behind like the audience's reaction and enjoyment of the show, which is also like, I mean, for me, like when you see that, you're like, oh my god, obviously you want the person to be okay, but you kind of had this disconnection, like if they're hurt, then they're hurt, like that doesn't affect me. But just kind of like sickening to know that as an audience member, you're like condoning it in a sense.
I feel like as time goes on, like the longer the public watches something, like they get more desensitized to whatever they're seeing. And so everything has to be increased. There has to be new crazy twists. There has to be all this stuff added because people get bored.
Yeah.
I feel like that's probably very similar to the Hunger Games. Like, I mean, how can you add any more than people dying?
Yeah.
But just like the mutations and the cortiquel and things have to be even more dramatic each year so people stay interested.
It reminds me of like in season 2, you know, there was a huge incident where a man got burned. And I listened to a podcast that's not the most appropriate sometimes, but I really like it because it does give you perspective of what it was like back in the early days when people like me have no idea, called the Survivor Historians. And they talk about how people were really freaking out about, is that man okay? Like, we have no way to get in contact with him. We're just viewers. And they presented us with that. We have no idea if he's okay, no idea if he's alive, if he got burned, no idea if he has, the ability to use his hands still. And whereas today, I don't feel like you would ever have that reaction. A lot of that's because social media, we can check up on them. They can tweet out and say, hey, I'm fine. But I also think that you're right. There's a desensitization, did I say that right, that comes about as we watch more and more reality shows. I think people just kind of lose. And I see myself do that too. You're kind of like, I don't really care if if the family I'm watching gets in a fight. Like, that's why they're on TV. They're supposed to entertain me. I think we all have become that way. So it's kind of fun, especially with injuries like getting burned or getting evacuated. Those are serious, and it is kind of sick in a way. But my thing is always they signed up for it. Like, they knew the risk. They're making a show. That's just part of the show. I mean, to ignore it though on the production side would be an injustice to the story of the season. So you kind of have to acknowledge the injuries and go with it.
I'm kind of just waiting for a season where somebody gets like severely injured or severely sick.
Some locations they've done and they've been so hard. I know one, Guatemala, was really tough. They've never gone back there for that reason. I think Africa was pretty hard on people. But I know in Survivor Korong, which is in Cambodia, they were there for 2 seasons and they said it was one of the worst. I mean, that was season 32. So even, early days of Survivor were super survivalistic. And you're in season 32 and they have refused, they'll never go back there because the conditions were so bad. I mean, one guy had to be evacuated. They thought he was going to die. They'd come out and said, like, we thought it was going to be our first casualty on the show ever. That one's really a really hard episode to watch. It's just really traumatic, honestly, to be sitting there watching, your tribe mate go down and possibly be dead. It's a lot to go through. And I know in the French version of Survivor, Koh Lanta, I think it's called, a man did die the first day they were there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they were doing a tug of war challenge, and I think he had a heart attack during the middle of it. And he died. So it's just, I don't know, it makes you think reality TV. I mean, yeah, they're safe, but anything could always happen.
Well, I mean, it was interesting because I don't know if it was 41 or 42, where there was a man who was on it, but he was on certain medications. So like they came the first day and had to tell him that he couldn't be on the show any longer. I mean, I'm glad obviously that they took health and safety first, but then it's also really disheartening to think, especially during like COVID, flying all the way out there, getting all the tests done, staying out there, and then having to be shipped off like back home.
I mean, I guess they got to be so careful because they don't want to have that first casualty. That would be really bad for the show.
Yeah.
In my opinion, with the places that they've been to have never had a casualty in 22 years, like, that's pretty impressive. I mean, you're talking about Africa. I mean, there's one night where the lions were like prowling around their camp, like stuff like that's really impressive that you've never had anyone die. But
or like poisonous snakes. I would be thinking about the snakes there. I don't
Africa,
know.
that's the one season that I'm like, I don't think I could do it. I think I'd go home. It's such a scary season.
I've always said Africa would be my, I mean, they go through a lot. I know one guy, one of the winners of one of the later seasons, said that he got home and he had parasites, which is fairly, I feel like it's fairly common for a lot of them with the water they're drinking. It's not super clean, but he said he could see the parasite moving under his skin, like just stuff like that. You don't think about after they go home. Like, how disgusting.
I feel like Survivor helps me to kind of understand a little bit more how, I mean, obviously the careers are brainwashed, but how they might see the games as, a real challenge, like a test for glory or whatever, because you get that feeling like watching Survivor, if you're a fan of it, like, oh, I want to see if I could do that. I mean, and the stakes aren't the same, but it's still putting yourself through something not that pleasant and wanting to see if you could do it yourself. And like, I definitely have that feeling. So I don't know. I feel like that helps me relate to the careers a little bit.
I mean, I always laugh about how, well, not me, but my family always says Holly would not survive an hour on Survivor.
I don't think you would.
No, I wouldn't. And I know I wouldn't survive in the Hunger Games. So it goes hand in hand. Like, not something I'd ever sign up for. But would any of you ever, like, at least audition for Survivor? Or, like, would that be a dream of yours to be on it?
It's tempting when I'm watching it because I'm like, this would be so cool and so fun. But then when they talk about not having food and they're sitting there in the pouring rain, I'm like, I don't think I could do that. I think I would not want to, I don't know, I would not survive that, I feel like.
I definitely wish I would have been old enough to have been like on the older seasons, because I would have liked the survival part of it more. But yeah, if you put papers in front of me right now, I'd sign them and go, yeah, 100%. I've never auditioned. With school, I never had time. But yeah, I think that would be like the coolest thing ever. But only if I win. I don't want to go and be like first out. That's boring.
Oh, yeah.
That would suck.
Wah, wah.
Can't be first out.
What about you, Emily?
There's a lot of different aspects to it. So I think it would be fun. I'd love to see if I could do the challenges. Like, that is the most exciting part of it. Like, when they have to balance on things or anything underwater, I always like want to try that. But I don't know. I feel like the social part of it would be so hard. And I feel like that would get me out. I feel like people wouldn't trust me.
No, you're like the Spencer. Like, whenever I think of like what Survivor personality
she
you remind
is.
me of, it's Spencer.
The awkward one.
No, he's like very evil on the inside. I feel like if I was like you're like aligned with you, I feel like you just like murder me in the middle of the night.
Yeah, I would. But I feel like people would be able to see that.
No.
Yeah, I don't know how I would play the social game.
I could see like an Aubrey, if anyone's ever seen her
Mhm.
season. I don't know if anyone has, but
That's who I was
could see
thinking
that.
between Spencer and Aubrey for Emily.
yeah, I think that's a winning combo right there.
I want to hear more about your note on the manipulation by the hosts on Survivor.
I'm not one of those people that's blind to think that they don't manipulate the show. Like, I'd like to think that they don't, but I know there's stuff that goes on. But in the first season, especially, like I said, they were very unsure of whether the show was going to be successful. So they were doing basically everything in their power legally that they could to make the show a success. So, for instance, one of the biggest characters on the first season is Rudy. He was an older man, 72, I think a Navy SEAL. And he was about to get voted out. So they went and spoke to the tribe and told them to vote your conscience. And Rudy could really be of help soon if you want to keep him. The challenge is coming up. Rudy could really help. And so they got a woman named Stacey Stillman voted out. Stacey Stillman went and sued the show afterwards, and they settled it out of court, which usually means that there was some guilt. You know, like, they just kind of want it to go away. But a lot of the things that came out in Stacey Stillman's lawsuit spoke about the manipulation on the side of production. So there was supposedly people who were being fed food in between challenges to kind of give them a boost. Supposedly production was taking any fish that were getting caught in the nets out in the ocean and letting them go so that they wouldn't have as much food, or they were planting certain foods in the wilderness for them to find, you know, so stuff like that. It always makes me think of like game makers, how they manipulate the arena to either suffer or help the tributes in a certain way. Even more recently, supposedly people have come out and said that the do or die twist with the boxes, that, you know, you have 3 boxes, 2 are, you know, you're going home, 1's you're staying. That when Jeff pointed, he pointed to the one that was safe, and he said, and 2 of these are you're going home. And when he pointed to the 2 boxes that said you were going home. So people have said he's done that.
It is weird the last 2 seasons with that challenge, how that's happened both times.
That came from Ricard. So he said, I mean, he's smart enough to be watching for that. I feel like kind of interesting to think about that. The one that he points to is the one she picks for safety. So just stuff like that. It's always been kind of questionable how pure the show is. I'm not one to think that they're giving food or like they're going to a hotel or anything, but I think there's definitely some strings being pulled at times.
There has to be.
The way they read the votes is way too perfect and suspenseful to happen like that every single time. I've always thought they like put them in a certain order.
Don't they have somebody organize the votes?
Jeff goes back there and they say it could take up to 15 minutes for him to organize the votes in a certain way, because you have to take into account
figure out
they
how
have
to
an
read them.
idol. Yeah, things like that. So they said just
Mm.
getting travel started could take 2 hours or more. I mean, there's always going to be manipulation. I think reality shows have that stigma anyways, that they're all rigged, or they're all
Scripted
fake,
or whatever.
which is probably true for a lot of them. I'm just naive enough to think that Survivor's the lesser of those, but I'm sure it still goes on.
I mean, I don't feel like it's scripted, but there are definitely ways to, I mean, also make it a better viewing experience, like the reading of the votes. Like,
Right.
it just makes sense to put them in a certain order.
And that's what a lot of people say. Well, if it makes a better show, I really don't care what they do, as long as they do it. Like, I don't care
Yeah.
that they got Rudy to stay. He made a better TV show than Stacey would have if she stayed. Like, I don't care. So I don't know. It's just interesting to think about how, whenever I'm sitting there watching, is that really how it went down? Is that what they really wanted to happen? Things like that.
That sounds like very Hunger Games-esque. I don't care as long as it entertains me.
Yeah.
Another thing that I find really interesting, it's one thing to like watch the show and not see the cameras, obviously, because you're not gonna record the cameras around the people. But I like watching behind the scenes videos where you're seeing all the cameras sit around the camp. Like you would act a completely different way compared to not being on camera. So I think that's really interesting to think about how different people can play up the camera and play up their personality when the cameras are rolling.
I listed that under like perception versus reality, which I think is hugely prevalent in the Hunger Games. Like Katniss knows she's playing for an audience. That's why she smiles at the cameras when she finds out Pete is with the careers. That's why she plays up or tries to play up, because she's not the best at it. Tries to play up the baby gate type thing. I think it's become less about trying to win sometimes and more about trying to be aspect to play again. People know they're probably not going to win. They'll be like, well, let me make the biggest character I can so that I'll be asked back for another time. I think it's become that type of thing. But
Yeah.
someone once said there's 17 versions of Survivor, or 16 of the people's versions, and the one that we're told. So it's always kind of interesting to think about what really happened out there, because if this person's saying this and the other person is denying it, what happened?
It's got to be such a fun but also daunting job to be in charge of the edit, to craft together a story that's also going to play well for who ends up winning at the end.
I just want to hit on the PSD. I think that's the most fascinating,
Okay,
probably
yeah.
a fascinating point of
Yeah, are there certain players, like in particular, who have talked about that?
I'm pretty sure it's Ozzy, to go back to Ozzy, which, wow, Ozzy. We talked about him a lot. He has gotten a little crazy, so it may have been what he smoked before he had the dream.
Yeah.
But he says multiple times that he's had dreams of the money just like falling out of his hands. Like he'll wake up in a sweat because he lost, obviously, from that description. And he said, it still like kind of haunts me in a way that I couldn't succeed at this, that I couldn't finish out this game and I couldn't win it. So he has a lot of dreams. I know of one lady, Kathy, from season 4, which Emily hates.
I don't hate her, but
No, I meant the season. She woke up the night after she got voted out, and she thought she was still in the jungle. In fact, the show psychologist had to sleep in the room with her because she was so like in the game still. And so just little stuff like that, just really. And then as far as the fire and there was a girl on season 37 who said anytime she got near a campfire, she would kind of get really anxious and get really nervous and kind of start to freak out because it just took her back to the island, which is, I don't know, people say that stuff. Is it true? I don't know. They're in an interview. They're probably trying to make it entertaining, but I know a guy the same way, kind of like Johanna in the Hunger Games, couldn't be out in the rain anymore because, they're just drenched in water for days on end on Survivor. And he would freak out anytime it rained, but stuff like that.
I can see that because the rain is miserable.
Yeah.
It looks awful.
Oh, yeah. They say that's one of the worst parts of the whole show. Nalia from Survivor 4 with Kathy, she made a list of everything she wanted to eat when she got home. So when she got home, she got it all and took it to her room. And I've heard a lot of people doing that. They like food hoard. They'll steal food, or they're like, your body goes through something like that. And it's traumatized. Naturally, it's traumatized. So she would hoard food or anything she could get her hands on. And I think a lot of people go through that. I've heard a lot of people just overeat and they gain more weight than they ever had to begin with. So stuff like that. And then trust, the last one, families. To me, that's the most fascinating one, is people often say they go home and they can't even trust some of their loved ones. for a little bit, or not think they have an ulterior motive if they tell them something, or think that they're being lied to. I've heard a lot of people say that they come home and feel like they're being lied to all the time. And I just think your mental state is still stuck in the game at that point. It's sad. I mean, I don't think people still have that issue, 10 years later, but even coming home for a week or two and having to work through that would be really difficult, I would think.
Yeah, that's got to be so hard, going from having to analyze literally every second or every word that everybody says, to not having to do that anymore.
I always think about Rob talking about how he just would stay up all night. Like, he wouldn't sleep. He'd probably sleep like an hour, but he would just be going over strategy like constantly. And like, I don't know how I would be if I was in that headspace so much and without so much sleep. Is the $1 million worth it? Like, I need money, don't get me wrong, but like, is it worth me losing my mind?
It doesn't seem like a whole lot of money, to be honest, to me. $1 million? Like, you would think it would be more.
And then you have to take out taxes, which is, it used to be, I don't know what the rate would be now. Tax laws have changed. Anyways, the accountant's showing. The tax rate and everything used to be that you got to keep $600,000 for a reality show. It's pretty good. Most reality shows don't have $1 million. I know The Amazing Race does, but you have to split it between two people. So
just seems like it's worth more.
Yeah, personally, I know I've always been told crazy for this. I'd take the title over the money. I'd just like to be able to say I've won Survivor. If I don't have the money, the money would be nice too. But I'm crazy enough to say I'd take the title of being a winner over that.
You can get money with brand deals too afterwards. I'd like to hear if there's a specific moment from the Hunger Games that is most Survivor-like to you. For me, I would say the most Survivor-like was the first few days of the 74th games for me. Just hearing, it reminds me about like the Survivor contestants getting to their camp, having to set things up. I liked when they used to have to like swim out from the boat and like grab all the supplies and go to the camp. And so just reading the first few chapters of that arena with Katniss like talking about what she's going to eat, how she's going to find water, like her urine being like dark yellow. That's what I think of.
Such an odd line.
I know.
The only urine I've passed has been dark brown.
And I know, and like 5th grade me was like, oh, that's what that means. Okay, she's dehydrated.
Definitely when they form the alliances, that's what it makes me think of the most, especially when they're like on Survivor and they are like, you just never know who to trust. It really reminds me of that group that PETA joins with the careers, and then like when C's kind of out of it, they're like, we need her, or we need him to get to find Katniss and we'll kill him later, that kind of stuff. And just like, you never know who to trust.
Especially like the line, I think from Survivor, a lot of times people say like, you can have an ally or an alliance and you have to know when to cut it off before they do, or else they're going to get to you. It's like same thing with the Hunger Games. It's just like a very eerie concept to me.
The golden rule of Survivor is do unto others before they do unto you.
Yeah.
That would be my motto.
Okay, what would be your moment, Chase?
Probably, and this is kind of just a broad moment, but like anytime Katniss was debating on whether or not to trust PETA, because I think that's what it just comes down to in Survivor. Social politics. Can you trust the people? Can you not? And are they playing you or are they not? And I mean, in the Hunger Games, if they're playing you, you're going to be dead, so you really have to watch your back. And I just think her constant internal struggle of, can I trust him? Can I not? I think that's the most Survivor part of the whole. I mean, other than the fact that they're outside surviving, but I think that's the most psychologically, it's the most Survivor part of the whole book. It's just the constant internal trust issue.
And Emily?
I think I mentioned this before, but it's catching fire when they're all on the beach. They're all like doing it's visually reminds me of Survivor, like fishing, and Katniss and PETA are together and they're talking about how long they should stay with the group versus go off and do their own thing. So that reminds me that discussion a lot of Survivor.
Rob and Amber actually have a very specific discussion that always reminds me of that too.
Yeah,
They're
I was
on
going
the
to say
rocks
that reminds me
together,
of Rob and Amber.
just debating, what do we do with these people? We've made them so mad. How are we going to get through this without getting cut ourselves? And it always brings me back to the Hunger Games.
They are basically Katniss and PETA. Rob kind of reminds me more of Finnick than like Katniss and PETA, but because he just like knows everything. He does everything so
and
well.
He's favored by production. I've always thought that too. Like, they love him. they'd do anything for him. I think, a
Who
lot of people say
wouldn't?
they set up his season. So I think a lot of stuff like that. Yeah, I think he's very much a Finnick.
Who are your top 3 favorite Survivor players?
Trying to think if there was any like women that were my favorite, but I don't have any on my list.
Mine are like women. I'm like, I love.
For me, I picked more than 3, but both the Robs are just the best. Rupert, I also love,
Oh, love Rupert.
and Spencer.
Huh?
Those are my tops.
The first Survivor player I ever thought was like the best is Rob Cesternino, season 6. Him and Boston Rob are my top 2. Always have been. Season 2, Tina Weston is my third favorite player.
It's a
Which is
solid
random.
choice.
That's
Yeah.
an odd mixture, but I love her. I think she's really snappy. I think she's a lot meaner than she lets on. But I
Which
think
means
she's
she's
funny.
a good player. She got people to like
Yeah.
her.
Yeah. And I don't think she's mean as in like cold-hearted. I just think she can be very sharp with her words, and I like that. I think that's funny.
Well, based off of my favorite season, obviously I love Kim. Kim is my favorite. I like
Kim.
Parvati because I just think of her move with Russell. That was just everything to me. I think that's really why I like season 20. I mean, as a joke, I love Philip. Philip is like, if I could see anyone ever again, I love me some Philip.
Wait, reminds
He's never
me.
coming back. He hates the show.
I love him. He's the guy who like talked to his ancestors and like dressed up like them and like was crazy, and he set up like the whole like agent like I don't know what the name is. Yeah.
And he gave
Delpharos.
everyone nicknames.
Yes.
The
See,
executioners.
it's just like he's so out of touch. I love it so much. Like I don't think we'll ever see a player like him ever again. And I just love humor, so it's funny to see that. But like an all serious third favorite would have to be Mike Holloway, because his like him at the end of what season was it? You'll know.
30.
It was just awesome. Like everyone was against him. He won individual immunity like back to back to back to back. And I mean, I'm not saying I loved his character, but you have to like respect the guy for literally keeping himself alive and winning.
I'll have to pick from this season and last season because I don't remember all of
It's
the
okay.
seasons. Jonathan's my favorite. Like I know
love him.
that the strong ones usually aren't like the favorites, but he seems very humble. He's just like not human. Like when he does all those challenges, I'm like, how in the world? And for the first part of the season, I mean, like he's carried his tribes pretty much like on his back with all of the like stuff that he won for them, like the food and the different prizes and stuff. So like he's my favorite right now.
He's really smart too. Like I admire him as like kind of the stronger player, because I usually don't. They usually don't make it very far.
And then last season, I really liked Xander. He came across as like not smart at all, just like this, I don't know, like surfer dude kind of attitude. But then like he was actually really smart behind the scenes, and he got to the final 3, so that was kind of cool. And I like Lindsay, right? On this season. I like her a lot too. She just seems like a strong woman who is also really smart. Yeah, I don't have that many seasons I can pick from, but from those 2, I like those.
Besides, like we talked about Rob, kind of like Finnick, are there any Survivor players who remind you of Hunger Games characters or vice versa?
You know, I always thought Jerry was kind of like Joanna from
I guess definitely. That's a good one.
Australia.
Oh,
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And then she was back in the All-Star. She was a villain.
I've always thought like a Glimmer or a Cashmere or something like that would be a person that I would use to describe like a Parvati. I mean, she definitely uses it as her strategy, but I think she's probably over sexualized by a lot of the fan base. I think a lot of people like her because she's cute and she's pretty and she's got a nice smile, and it's like she's really good at the game too. Like I think we forget about that sometimes. And so I think she would be like a District 1 type girl that probably gets a lot of attention for her looks, but she's also pretty deadly at the game.
Yeah, I said she kind of reminds me of a career too. Like she'll stab you in the back.
Yeah, that's what I
Love
thought.
it.
Around Heroes versus Villains, there's a big talk about like the new breed of Survivor player, and everyone's like, it's Parvati, like the manipulative. I'll stab you in the back or be your best friend one day. You know, like I'll turn on you quickly. It's a game. and she was kind of the name that everyone used to describe the new version of like the advanced player. So yeah, I definitely think a career fits her best.
To kind of like close out the episode, we have some fun questions. In the Hunger Games, tributes can bring a token into the arena. On Survivor, players can bring one luxury item. And what would your luxury item be?
I wrote this question, but I didn't think about it.
See, I thought about it too long. I feel like my answer is dumb, but I was reading through Survivor, like what Survivor players have brought, and I just thought it would be fun to bring like Cards Against Humanity or something like something to like
something to pass the time.
Yeah,
something
to
fun.
pass the time, but then also like you learn people's humor because it can be a very dark game, like dark sense of humor, and so it would kind of like let me know like what I can joke around with and like who has the same sense of humor as
That's
me.
really
and I feel
smart because people will like bring down their walls probably a little bit if they were doing something fun like that, and you could kind of learn more about them.
That game scares me. I've never played.
Oh, I play all.
I refuse to
on
play.
the couch as people play.
Guys, we gotta play it.
I'd be looking through the cards and be like, we gotta take out this one, we gotta take out this one.
I played it once.
No, we're not gonna do that.
Yeah, I played it once with a group of people and I refuse ever again. I cannot.
I'll play apples to apples.
Yeah,
my family does apples to apples junior.
Okay, Emily, do you have one or?
I feel like I'd bring like a blanket or a pillow or a flashlight.
See, I thought about it. I'm 22 and I still have
Is that a dumb answer?
The flashlight got me.
Like the flashlight's funny.
I don't like the dark.
Stop. It dies like on day like 7.
Yeah, with extra batteries.
Extra batteries. Yeah.
See, for me, I was like, if I could bring one thing, like I'm 22, I still have like my baby blanket, like my safety blanket, and I'd be like, I want to bring that with me. But then I think about how disgusting it would get, and I was like,
or
no,
I'd lose it or something.
Yeah.
Can't risk that.
Never. Okay, Chase, you're next. What would you bring?
What? One time I got asked this question, what would you bring to a deserted island at a school event with like a bunch of kids I didn't know? And I said my dog, so that I would have a companion, or if I got hungry, I'd have a meal. And that really broke the ice. But on a serious note, I'm a germaphobe, or not a germaphobe, like a clean freak when it comes to like hygiene and stuff. So I would probably bring either Q-tips, because even though they're dangerous, that's disgusting to be walking around with your ears. I know a woman brought a toothbrush kit, so she got floss and a toothbrush, toothpaste. So I would bring that. I don't think they'd allow that now. That was the first season, but I would definitely bring that.
I always think about how disgusting these people must smell, because I mean, when you're huddling together, like during the storms or something, or at night, I'm like, just imagine like the BO and like no one's brushed their teeth. Oh.
Is that why those little green things are that they rub on their teeth? Is that for dental stuff?
On the
I
show?
just noticed in the show they take those little green plants and rub them on their teeth.
They're just sticks. Yeah, they just rub on. They started doing that in like season 3. It's just a way to, you kind of break it a little, so it's like a toothbrush. You know, it's like frayed at the end, and then you just rub your teeth. I don't really know how well that does. Some people use sand. That's disgusting, because then you're chewing on sand when you go back up.
It sounds kind of dumb, but I would bring a hairbrush because I hate when my hair gets like tangled and it just drives me crazy. I feel like that's something I would bring.
We have hygienic guests, everyone. One of my favorite parts of Survivor is like the family visit episode, which I'm bummed we haven't had for the past 2 seasons, obviously. Similar to that, in Catching Fire, PETA talks about how there are the interviews that happen for family members and friends of the top 8 in the arena. So a fun question would be, who would be a loved one that would visit you if you were on Survivor? We'll start with Taylor.
I would say my dad, because he's such a big Survivor fan. I feel like he would want to come there, and that'd be pretty cool for him too.
Cute. Okay, Chase.
My dog. No.
I could eat them. Some fried chicken.
It would be between my parents. My dad refuses to watch Survivor because he says it's dumb. But I would like to see him out there with me just to see how far I've gotten. But it would also be a toss up because my mom loves Survivor. I just got her into it a couple years ago, so we've been watching it chronologically. So she's watched about half the seasons now. So it would be a hard choice. It'd be one of them.
Emily?
I'd want to pick my sister. I think that'd be the most fun for me, but in the
Deb
interest
goes on
of
the bus again.
Deb.
in the interest of winning the game, though, I'd probably pick my dad because I think the public would like him. He's a big personality, so anything to win over people. Pick
I
my
think
dad.
people also just love like seeing like a father-daughter relationship on Survivor too. Like it's just like so
Yeah,
wholesome.
and Dad tug at people's hearts more than my sister. So
Yeah.
It's one of
but
the two interactions that's made Jeff cry before on a family visit.
Mm.
Father-daughter.
Wait, what was the other one?
A mother-daughter.
Oh, sweet.
So.
Mine would be either my dad or Max. More so my dad because it would be like obviously father-daughter, but then Max because I feel like he gets me more than anyone else. So I'd just be like, I'm so anxious right now. Like, here's everything that's going on, and he would understand what I'm going through. So it'd be one of the two.
He could bring the soundboard.
He could, exactly. And I think
Who
that would win
ordered
over
this
Hunger Games
pig?
fans.
Yeah.
And then I guess I love this question the most out of all the ones we have today. What would you excel at in Survivor, and what would be the hardest part?
I'll
So
go first because I already kind of said mine. But I think like the water challenges, I think I would be good at.
mhm.
And I think the social game would be the hardest, just keeping up with everyone and trying to make yourself seem like people can trust you.
Taylor, what about you?
I think I would excel at sneaking into like the final, maybe not the final three, but like towards the end, just from being like not a super like overwhelming personality, but also not all like being worthless. Like I don't want to say worthless, but like I
No.
would contribute. I would
I
contribute, but I wouldn't be way out front and like super obvious. So I could kind of be like, her name is slipping me right now, but the girl that won the last season, what was her name?
Erica.
Yes, I feel like she was really good at like pulling her weight, but at the same time, she wasn't like out in front and she wasn't seen as a threat, but she kind of worked her way in there. So that would be something I feel like I could do pretty well at. Was there one about not doing well at something too? Was that the other part of the question?
Yeah, what would you struggle
The
at?
physical challenges.
Yeah.
The physical challenges, I would never ever win. I would be a liability. I would have to sit out. Like that would just
Chase.
I think I would be good at, my strategy going in would be to be like the Rob sister Nino. I would be thinking all the time, but I would be like, just try to be like the goofy little brother that everyone kind of ignores over to the side, like just cracking jokes or smiling. Like that would be me. I'd just be like the jokester over in the corner acting stupid. So everyone would think I was dumb and move on. But I know that I've always said the part that I would struggle with the most is the paranoia. I would be paranoid every time someone was talking. Every time they walked off together, I'd be freaking out. It would just, I know that would take over in the first few days. So I'd be paranoid.
Mm.
I feel like you'd get voted out quick because you're funny and likable. So people would be like, nope, goodbye.
Well, now I would tone it down, but I'd be the
Would
quiet.
you? Could you?
I know, that's the thing. Can you really do that for 39 days? Probably not. But
Yeah. No, I think about it because I mean, like we only watch like an hour long, 2 hour long episode, but you're living it every single minute.
Yeah, you
for
cannot
days
slip
and
up.
days.
Like if you're putting on a front.
Yeah.
That's
yeah,
gotta
I
be
think
so
that's
hard.
possible.
I think like for me, I would like to think that similar to Taylor, I could be kind of like a background player, but I'm an introvert, and once my social tank is empty, like I can't do it. And I think it reminds me of like Marianne when they're like during the storm, they're just like, Marianne will not shut up. And I would be the same way. Like I would lose my cool, I feel like, just because I can't, like once I can't talk, I can't talk. Like I'm done talking. And so I think that would kind of hurt my game. And I always think about how you have no physical fuel, you have no sleep, you have no food. So like any competition, I feel like I would be awful at. So again, this show was not built for a person like me. I don't think I'd be good at it. But yeah, I don't think I'd be good at the Hunger Games. I'd be like a fox face, like run away and hide type of gal. So
berries in my back pocket.
Yeah, ready to go.
Any final thoughts?
The finale's this Wednesday.
Hopefully you watched it, people.
Can we say who we all want to win
Yeah.
right now, since we don't know yet?
Oh,
Or
yeah,
is that
let's do
too
that.
spoilery?
Let's do it.
Like who's still in it?
So we're at the final 5 right now, right?
Mike, the firefighter.
Ooh,
Lindsay, the dietitian fast runner on the sand. She amazes me. Marianne,
yeah, I heard about
And-
that.
Jonathan, and Romeo.
I have my favorites, so you guys can go.
I would love Jonathan to win.
Me too.
Mhm.
That's fine.
That's my pick. I feel like that's different than past seasons, and yeah, I would just like to see the strong guy make it to the end.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I agree. I also like Mike a lot. Mike has been one of my favorites from the start, just because he's so silly.
And he's such a
Billy.
he's very much a man of his word, and he's very big on trust and honesty, which I feel like is kind of not good for this game, but so far it's worked for him. So
And finally, Chase, you're gonna know the winner. Who is it?
I'm gonna actually probably surprise y'all. My winner pick is Marianne right now.
I feel like that's highly likely.
can I add
I've
something
heard
else
a
that has
lot
to do
of
with Hunger
Marianne.
Games? Like
Yeah.
going with Marianne and Hunger Games.
Mhm.
Whenever we were talking about characters that remind us of Hunger Games people, like I kind of got some Lucy Gray vibes from her, because Lucy Gray's kind of out there and kind of
Mhm.
crazy, and then she ends up winning it all. I don't know. Sorry, I didn't mean to
Yeah.
interrupt you, Chase, but I just
I like that.
No,
Mhm.
I like that.
Yeah, she's very extra. I hadn't thought about that. I like that.
I've heard a lot of Marianne. There's been an undercurrent of Marianne's going to be the winner. I keep hearing that, so I don't know if that's true. I don't
Especially
know.
with like that move that she pulled. Like
I heard about that.
She's just always been in it, but she's never been in charge. No one's looking at Marianne saying we got to get Marianne out. Now, whether they come down and say she's the young one, she's going to play the sympathy card, that may come into play in the finale. But I don't know. The more I heard people talk about her, I think Marianne's coming out of this thing, at least in the final 3. I think she's going to be the winner, though.
people have been after her though, just because she's annoying.
Yeah, no,
so
I'm
they
so-
wanted her out.
Like I
But-
love it, and I love the attitude and the positivity. But again, thinking about being surrounded by somebody so extroverted 24/7, I'm just surprised that like nobody's like, just get rid of her. Like it's
I'd have
happened
been like, we
before,
have to
but-
get out Marianne.
Yeah.
I
And-
can't anymore.
Literally, the first 2 minutes of the premiere, I looked at my mom. I said, she's going to get old quick.
Yeah.
And she was just on the beach. Like, they had just gotten on the beach and talked to Jeff. I said, she's going to get old. Like, I'd want her out quick. She's annoying.
Yeah.
And my mom said, no, you got to love those players.
So that's how I said.
No.
It was like reversal between me and my family. I
If
was
she
like,
makes it to
"No."
the very end, I would wonder how she would talk about herself though. Because like if she were to cry or like, I don't know, get too emotional, or I don't think I would want to vote for her. So it'll be interesting how she attacks that if she gets to the end.
Here's my overall prediction. I think there's going to be a civil war between Jonathan and Lindsay. So one's going to get taken out. And personally, I hope it's Lindsay. I would rather see Jonathan go. I don't think Jonathan can win. I'm just going to put it out there. I don't think people like him enough.
Yeah, he's
I
kind
don't
of
think they respect the strategy.
Yeah.
I think he struggled a little bit with strategy lately. I think people are going to turn against him. Mike, maybe, but like, I don't know. I don't really know what Mike's done. I like Mike, but I can't think of a thing that I would be like, wow, that's pretty
Yeah, I feel like
impressive that
he's
he
just
did
been
that.
played a lot.
Yeah, so then you're down to Romeo and Marianne. I don't think Romeo's winning it. Unless
Not the
there's
rice
something
eater.
crazy. Not the rice eater. So I mean, you're down to maybe Marianne or Lindsay I think it's Lindsay's game to lose at this point, but I think Marianne can win it. So that's my prediction.
If you
think the
can
next-
respect Jonathan for other things though, like strategy doesn't have to be the main thing every single time. Like he was strong, he helped his tribe a lot, he was good at the challenges, even the ones that weren't like so much strength but like balance and everything. So I don't know.
I agree with that, but looking at the jury, as unathletic as those people are, I mean, it's not a very athletic group. I just think there's a lot of gamers on it. I think you're thinking about like Drea. She's a gamer.
Yeah, who they're
Hi,
gonna vote
gamer.
for.
You know, so I think they're going to look at strategy. If it was another group that was more physical, I could see that. But I think they're going to be looking at strategy. But maybe not. You may be right.
I also think like he was well loved early on, but then he started making some mistakes in terms of like how he spoke to people, and I think that'll rub them the wrong way too.
But he
so.
did such a good job, I feel
I
like,
know.
doing it as long as he could. He's hangry, you know?
Yeah, I think he's starting to feel the effects
Poor
of it all.
guy.
My winner pick just went home, so I really want to know
Yeah,
more.
that was who I wanted before.
I thought he was like, he's a good person to get out, but
I like this shirt
Thought so
too. If he
too.
comes back. As the ostrich
It's
on it.
because he got called out, like, as being the one who orchestrated everything.
People
Which he
started
was.
realizing he was playing all different sides, that they couldn't trust him.
He was so good. He was playing in the background too. Like no one ever really cared about Homer.
yeah, he was awesome. I said him and Lindsay from the start. I said they're gonna do well because Lindsay's gonna float by, and I think, yeah. I mean, I haven't seen the last episode, obviously, but leading up into it, I'm like, this dude's in charge of everyone.
Well, we will see.
Yeah. And thank you again for coming on our episode, Taylor and Chase. We loved having
Thank you.
Yeah, finally,
Yeah.
Chase is going to go into hiding for the rest of his life. He's done with us.
That's it. No
Yep.
more tribute talks.
No more tribute talk. And yeah, join us tomorrow for tribute talk. And we'll have to talk about maybe potential ballad news and on-set cinema. So, yeah,
Zendaya.
Who knows what we'll be talking about?
anything. Awesome. Okay, bye.
Thank you guys.
Bye.